Significant injury news to get to today involving the New York Mets. We get to the Cincinnati Reds 2025 season preview. We touch on the Detroit Tigers and several other news items from the day. That and much, much more ahead here at The Upside. And welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us late on a Monday evening. We're going to get into the Cincinnati Reds season preview video here in just a little bit, but a lot of news items to get into. So let's get on to it. So New York Mets have had some injury issues already. We know Frankie Montas was shut down due to a lat strain. The team said that they were looking 6 to 8 weeks on this injury. Montas says he could be 4 to 6 weeks. Either way, he's going to be out for about a month. Then we get some other news that they're going to have other issues in their starting rotation, including Sean Manaea, who has now been shut down for a couple of weeks due to an oblique strain. So a rotation that already was seen as a weak spot for this organization, even with those two starting pitchers in the rotation, takes 2 hits to start the year. Things are not boding well for the Mets starting staff. Leads you to believe that there might be something coming down the road here. Maybe a reunion with Jose Quintana just to give them stability at the top of that rotation, or possibly a trade for a proven innings-eating type of starting pitcher here to at least get them through the month of April. So we'll see which direction they go, but to me they need to make some type of a move to bolster that pitching staff early in the season and not just wait until the trade deadline to get their true number one ace to go along with Kodai Senga. Other injury news. Nick Madrigal has suffered a fracture of his shoulder. He is expected to miss quite some time with the New York Mets. He was expected to be their utility infielder. Now, good news for the Mets. They have plenty of guys in their minor league system that could very easily fill the role. There has been rumblings about Jose Iglesias, whether or not he's going to sign there. Sounds like he would love to go back to the Mets, but the Mets have no interest in a reunion at this point, even after the injury to Madrigal. So, curious to see how the rest of spring training goes. If the rest of those bats they're thinking could take the role of Madrigal going into the season, maybe they decide, hey, if those bats struggle, that we might not or that we might actually go out there and try to bring in Iglesias at that point. But at the moment, there's like 4 guys I can think of off the top of my head that could easily make the opening day roster in Madrigal's place, and they don't need to go out there and make the move for Iglesias. So some tough news anyway for the New York Mets. Hopefully speedy recoveries for Montas, Minaya, and Madrigal. Three pieces of that roster that we're going to get some good burn this year for the New York Mets. Ultimately, we'll be missing at least some time maybe in the year. Nick Madrigal very well could be out until the All-Star break, maybe a little bit earlier than that, maybe a little bit later than that, but he's going to be out a while in either instance. Welcome in, Holly. Mark, welcome back. Been a minute since I've seen you, my friend. Rafe, welcome back. Man, I'm playing college football, and I just lost to A&M in the 6th overtime to miss the playoffs. Well, A&M was my favorite team when I was a very small kid anyway, back when they had Reggie McNeil and others, but I'm not much of a college football guy. I never have been, just not a lot of professionalism there. I get the excitement, the unpredictability of it. I'm not here for the unpredictability of it. I'm here to see great players do great things on the field, both offensively and defensively, and in college. You get a 5-star recruit going up against a walk-on. Come on, it's not real competition. So to me, that's why I prefer professional sports over amateur level of competition anyway. Alrighty, so some other news items. We'll start with a smaller item. Harold Ramirez, formerly of the Tampa Bay Rays, had his best years with that team anyway. You might remember them a few years ago in the postseason. Harold Ramirez was easily in their top 5 as far as their batting order. He quickly fell out of favor, and this is kind of the cautionary tale, at least, for Luis Arraez. Now, we all look at Luis Arraez and say, hey, this guy doesn't have a whole lot of power, doesn't exactly strike out a whole lot either, walks a fair amount, has a good on-base percentage, but in general is more of a contact-first type of hitter. He relies heavily on a good BABIP. That's a batting average on balls in play, for those who are not familiar with that acronym. But in general, most MLB players are between a 290 average and a 300 average on balls hit in play. Harold Ramirez, in his time with the Tampa Bay Rays when he was good, had a BABIP of around 345, well above league average, well above his career average at that point, and you could see why the Rays were utilizing him in that role. He was very good while he was having that kind of luck. When he didn't, things really fell out of the bottom. He didn't get on base because he didn't walk very much. He didn't strike out a whole bunch either, but because he wasn't able to get on base, because he didn't walk, and he wasn't having any luck as far as with contact rate, he was a well below average player. His weighted rate, runs created plus, the WRC plus, anyway, if you guys are unfamiliar with that acronym, was 92. League average is 100. So you can see how contact rate isn't everything in Major League Baseball, and if you don't have the ability to get on base with a walk, you can quickly find your way out of the league. Now, like I was saying at the beginning of this, is that this could be the cautionary tale for Luis Arraez. Luis Arraez is all about that contact rate. The one thing working in his favor is that he's able to work walks as well. So as long as he's able to do that, he's going to have a relatively solid floor. I wonder what he's going to earn in free agency. We hear kind of numbers thrown all over the place. Arraez wants a multi-year deal, kind of in the vein of what Cronenworth got with the Padres a couple of years ago, or a year or so ago. I don't think he's going to get that deal because that contact rate is so high. He relies a lot on that BABIP being a high result there as well. And while he's been very good, you got to wonder if there's going to be some regression at some point and what time that regression ultimately happens. So the Padres, I think we heard reports that they were around 3 for 40 is what their best offer was. Their only offer was that I heard in relation to Luis Arraez. But that's not going to get it done. Luis Arraez wants a long-term deal, and he has every right to try to go out there and attain that. But again, looking at Harold Ramirez, the cautionary tale for Luis Arraez is that if that walk rate goes down, or if that batting average starts to slip, you could quickly find yourself out of the league and on to your next gig. So that's kind of one of the smaller headlines that I did want to throw your attention to today. We also saw the Cleveland Guardians owner pass away, Larry Dolan, at the age of 94. We'll kind of push pause on what this means for the Guardians organization as a whole, as far as what they might do as far as ownership of the team going forward, what their budget's going to look like going forward. I just want to pay respects to the man and just let him enjoy his day, or let him have his day and get the flowers he deserves as owner of the Cleveland Guardians. They did it on a shoestring budget for such a very long time, and they kept it a competitive team for such a very long time in that market. He deserves to be commended for the ability to keep that franchise relevant even with the tight budget that they do have. I get that smaller market teams sometimes get a bad rap for not willing or being willing to go out there and spend like some of these bigger market clubs. But at a certain point, you got to realize they're doing so much with so little that they deserve to be commended for it. And by and large, the Guardians have been a well-run organization. You don't really see those big scandals that you see in some other organizations over the years. So every team has a few skeletons in their closet, don't get me wrong. But by and large, the Guardians have been a very good model franchise for the league, and thoughts for his family as well. Other bits of news. Let's get on to some baseball stuff. We did have a trade today. The Chicago Cubs had designated a player for his assignment, Canario. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name anyway, but I'm going to go with Canario. He was traded to the New York Mets today in exchange for cash. So kind of a depth option here. I think this could be someone that could at least push Marte in spring training, because if things go well for Marte, then I think the offense for the Mets could be even better than we expect. If things go poorly for Marte, maybe they just offload his deal entirely anyway and just cut their losses and go with somebody else. If a guy like Canario, who's only played 21 games each of the last 2 years combined for the Chicago Cubs, if he can come in and push Marte, that'd really give you a good thermometer or a good bearing for where Marte is at in that offense for them. As far as other news today, we'll go on to the Detroit Tigers. More injury news. Alex Cobb has been sidelined with another hip injury. Remember, he missed significant time with a torn labrum in his other hip that kept him out for the better part of a year, if not more. This is on the opposite hip now. So they're not getting to that type of extreme as far as, hey, we're worried about his entirety of the season. But I would say that with him having hip issues already, this being the opposite hip, I'm wondering if we're going down the road where Alex Cobb may not give them very much, if anything at all, this year. I'm not expecting him to get to 150 innings. I wasn't expecting that anyway. I think best case scenario, expecting Alex Cobb to go for 100, 120 innings was kind of seeing things with rose-colored glasses there. But injury issues have already cropped up here, and I wonder if this might cost him a significant portion of the season, as I think this is a type of injury that could be a recurring one if things go the way they have the last 2 or 3 years now for Alex Cobb. On the positive side for the Detroit Tigers, they did sign Andrew Chafin to a minor league deal. Good on them. He will get $2.5 million with incentives in that deal as well, or up to $2.5 million in that deal with the Detroit Tigers if he makes the major league roster. Remember, last year he had a great first half of the Detroit Tigers, parlayed that into a trade to the Texas Rangers at the deadline. Things did not go nearly as well in Texas. Really struggled to get outs late in games as well. And I understand he's a middle reliever, but the utilization of him in Texas was suspect. We'll go ahead and give him credit for having to deal with a little bit different usage than he did in Detroit. But Detroit, I think going back there should work well for him. They have a very good staff right now. They have 4 guaranteed starters already in their rotation. With Cobb now being out, I wonder, who could be that 5th guy. Casey Mize probably has the best chance to get that role to start the season. He was hit really hard last year, though. So if he struggles, there's like 5 other names. MLB Trade Rumors did a great job kind of breaking down each one of the options the Tigers could have as that number 5 starter. I encourage you guys to check that one out if you guys get some time. Rafe, only watching Texas other than for the NFL. Agree there. Rafe, Rangers finally won, even if it is spring training. True, they had a 9-run first inning. John Gray was the important part for me. He looked very crisp in 2 innings. Understandably, it's still February. We're a month away from the beginning of the season. Still very, very early, but it's always good to make sure these guys get into and out of the games healthy. We'll see how his body recovers tomorrow, but things were looking good on the starting pitching front there. As far as the bullpen, Mark Church gave up a couple of runs. Again, late in the game there. He's not going to be throwing every day in spring training, but I think he showed a little bit of that inexperience, that youthfulness here at the beginning of spring training, and I think he probably begins the season for the Texas Rangers at AAA. I don't think he'll start the season with the big league club. They have plenty of relievers already signed to major league contracts. They will probably turn to Mark Church early on in the season if there is a need for a reliever. I think Mark Church could be one of those early call-ups, but already as an 18 ERA, in spring training, understandably, it's still very early. And like I said, spring training usually is for guys trying to work on pitches, work on certain things, and you don't really, worry too much about the results. But I think the inexperience, showed a little bit today. And I think having him start off the spring training this way really kind of solidifies that he's going to be starting in the minor leagues for the Texas Rangers to begin the year. There was an outside chance that he could have began the year as their closer if he really, seized the bull by the horns in spring training and was absolutely dominant. 1 inning clean, 2 strikeouts, no walks on 9 pitches, and he did that over and over and over again. There was a case to be made that Mark Church could have won the closer job out of spring training. That ship has sailed. I think he's easily going to start the season in AAA. They have plenty of guys already signed to the Major League roster as well. On the positive side of news, on the offensive side for Texas, again, 9 runs in the first inning. Jock Peterson is the bright spot there with a 3-run home run. My eyes were glued, though, to Jonah Heim, who again struggled today. Got to see how things work out as we get closer and closer to spring training again, or get closer and closer to opening day. Again, guys are really working on things. I think Jonah Heim is doing a little bit of that, but I still want to see positive results for him more than anything else. If we get to the All-Star break and he's having a very similar year than what he had last year, we could see the Rangers move on from Jonah Heim before the All-Star break, at the very least by the trade deadline, instead of waiting until the end of the season to non-tender him a deal. So that could be one worrisome spots I have for Texas, but again, it's still way too early to make any judgments as far as that concerned. The main thing I will say is John Gray looked crisp, and you want to make sure he's healthy tomorrow as he kind of see how his body responds to pitching today. Steven, welcome in. Appreciate you joining us once again. Jose Quintana was removed from the World Baseball Classic qualifiers roster for Team Colombia. They believe it's because he signed with an MLB team. I hope so. I think he deserves a shot. He played very well for the Mets last year. I wonder with Manaea going down and Montas going down, that it could be the Mets, that could be the team come calling. I think they need to get somebody in there to at least eat some innings, so we'll see where things go. Rafe, no, not Heim, man. I mean, things didn't look good today for him either. I mean, like I said, it's still early, but he's going to have to show me something, especially early in the season, say April and May. If he has a batting average of, say, 190, which I think is very much a realistic possibility, if not lower, based off of the results we saw last year for Jonah Heim. He just looked very uncomfortable on both sides of the plate. There was some talk about them trying to get him to stick to one side of the plate versus the other and just try to get that side solved. But once you start doing that with a switch hitter, then you kind of get in his head a little bit, and then he's really never the same player again. So I'm hoping the best for Jonah Heim. He's a year removed from being an all-star starter, and I'm hoping he gets back to being that status. I think getting him off of his feet a little bit more this year will keep his bat a little bit fresher as the year goes along. I am expecting a better year than what we saw last year, but if things go poorly, Heim could ultimately find himself off of the Texas Rangers before we get to 2026. Alrighty. We talked a little bit about all the different news items, injury issues as well. One other bit of positive news, just for on-the-field baseball stuff, for those of you that like to get into the weeds on some of this kind of thing. Logan Gilbert unveiled a new pitch today, and it was absolutely filthy. It was so great anyway that the Mets hitters were all basically looking at it going, what the heck was that, man? Because it looks so good. They're kind of keeping this one under wraps, by and large. But I would say Logan Gilbert could really be ascending as a starting pitcher this year, taking that next great step from being an ace-like pitcher on a staff to being a bona fide number one ace for that Seattle Mariners club. Of course, they have George Kirby still there, but to me, Logan Gilbert could really elevate his status if he's or if he's going with a new pitch that is truly that dominant there. So that's one thing I'm keeping an eye on as well. We saw a 3-run home run today in spring training for Jorge Soler, and it just kind of made me think anyway, as far as an interesting bat at the trade deadline to kind of keep an eye on, is Jorge Soler, who's been proven to be a good asset for teams in a pennant race. He does have that big contract, of course, that you have to worry about as well, but I think the Giants ultimately had to sell off his deal in order to save themselves some money, if I remember correctly. But he could be a nice piece at the trade deadline if a team is interested. I think he'd be a good fit right now for the Angels anyway to kind of rehab his value and see if they can parlay that into a positive asset for their future development. So just kind of some positive developments here in spring training. It's not just injuries. It's not just trying to predict lineups, but actually what's going on in the baseball field as well. And I'm hoping Logan Gilbert is just as nasty as reports are in spring training, and I'm hoping he is going to be in that Cy Young conversation. I think Seattle is going to have that type of production because of how limited that offense is, so we'll see how the year really goes for the Seattle Mariners and Logan Gilbert. So again, just to kind of run through it, if you guys are just joining us, Sean Manaea is out a couple of weeks with an oblique strain. He joins Frankie Montas and Nick Madrigal on the injured list anyway for the New York Mets. There could be a signing there. I think they could be looking at Jose Quintana among other starting pitchers to help an already weak position group there with the starting rotation, or that with their starting group anyway. Before the Montas injury and Manaea. Now with both of those guys going down, one for a few weeks and one for about a month or two, now is the time for them to go out there and add at least one more starting pitcher to at least soak up some of the innings early in the season. And then again, at the trade deadline is when I expect them to try to go after a number one starter. We'll see if they ultimately bring it in. They have talked about Dylan Cease in the past. That could be an option for them as well. Other news, the Tigers, Alex Cobb has a hip injury. Opposite hip injury, the opposite hip anyway, from the hip he had injured a couple years ago that kept him out for a year and change. Hopefully he's able to get back on the mound here soon. But I think the Tigers are rightfully going to be very hesitant, and I wouldn't be expecting much out of him this year with a hip issue this early in spring training. I wonder if this could be a lingering issue, if not a long-term injury for the Tigers. And, of course, Andrew Chafin on a minor league deal. All right, let's get to the 2025 season preview for the Cincinnati Reds. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe if you haven't hit that on YouTube already. And without further ado, let's get going. Welcome to the 2025 season preview for the Cincinnati Reds. My name is Michael here at the Upside Sports Network. Appreciate you guys joining us on a Monday evening. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe if you haven't done so on YouTube already to stay up to date on all the latest news, rumors, lineup projections, trade ideas, any and all news items about your rotation, your lineup, your prospects, any and all information around Major League Baseball. Get it here first at the Upside. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe. Follow us on X at UpsideSN and on Facebook at Upside Sports Network. Cincinnati Reds 2025 season preview. Cincinnati Reds had a really good season last year, had some development in there, but they also had certain detractors in there as well. They needed some more pitching than they really got. They were a very young positional group. They ultimately decided to make a change at manager, which I thought was necessary for the past 3 years. They finally get it done, and they bring in, out of nowhere, Terry Francona to really take the helm there. So let's dig into where the Cincinnati Reds finished in 2024 and go from there. Alrighty, looking at where the standings were last year on the NL side, of course you had the Dodgers, Phillies, and Brewers win the division. Wild card, Padres, Braves, and Mets. Cincinnati Reds, to get a wild card spot, you needed 89 wins. Reds finished at 77. Not enough to get it done. Obviously, they have a lot of work ahead of them. Then you look at teams that are above them that kind of made big additions to their roster this season, with the Arizona Diamondbacks adding Corbin Burns and Naylor. They also helped out in their bullpen by getting Graveman. You look at the Chicago Cubs bringing in Kyle Tucker and Ryan Presley. Cardinals are looking to offload Arenado. Could be a spot for them to jump up a little bit here. Giants, they added Willy Adames and Justin Verlander to their staff. Should be a very good team there, a very competitive team there as well. Pirates, they got Horowitz there. They brought in Tommy Pham for their lineup, but overall it's going to be Paul Skeens and that pitching staff that's going to get it done. Nobody else beneath them is really going to push for a wild card. So if you're looking at the Cincinnati Reds, 77 and 85, not a bad year, but you're hoping with Terry Francona coming in, things are about to change and get a little bit more competitive there in Cincinnati. And how will it ultimately work with Elly De La Cruz and the rest of the roster? With that said, let's get into their actual roster. Looking at their lineup, you got Friedel out there in center, Elly De La Cruz at short, Matt McLain coming in and being a healthy Matt McLain this year will be big for this team. He slots in as the three-hole hitter. Tyler Stevenson, their catcher, 4. Jake Fraley, right field. Spencer Steer, another productive year would be a good thing for him. We'll have to see if his bat improves this year with that promise that he once had. Heimer Candelario has not worked out great for Cincinnati so far, but kind of that veteran influence, that veteran bat in that lineup. And then, of course, they made the trade for Gavin Lux and made a signing of Austin Hayes. I like the veterans that they brought in this year. Candelario, I think they're hoping to get something positive out of the signing there. Might be a lost cause, but we shall see. Looking at their bench, they made the trade for Jose Trevino, giving them a good 1-2 punch at that catcher spot. Then they got to Christian Encarnacion Strand, a good right-handed hitter they'll be using as a platoon at some point this year. Santiago Espinal and Stuart Fairchild. Some more good options there for the Reds, and they also have some others in the minor leagues we'll touch on here in just a minute. But looking at this lineup, I really like where they're at. You look at Elly De La Cruz, projected to be around a 5-WAR player. Matt McLain around a 3.5. The rest of the lineup, it's a lot of unknowns. How much are they going to get out of Fraley? How much are they going to get out of TJ Friedl? TJ Friedl is 29 and a half years old right now. They're expecting him to be about a league average player at best, it looks like. Maybe a 2-WAR player with the defense factored in. But offensively, he's not going to give you too much they're expecting. Elly De La Cruz, weighted runs created plus at 114. Same thing for Matt McLain, 115. Those are going to be your key cogs in that lineup. I think this could be a team that tries to get an improvement over there at third base over Candelario. Remember, they have a couple of prospects that could be in that spot instead, but Candelario probably going to get the nod to begin the year, at least at third base this year. Then, of course, Gavin Lux, you just want to see him be healthy. We'll have to see how he performs, and I'm hoping Austin Hayes, now being healthy, gets back to being the player we saw with the Baltimore Orioles. They're expecting a league average season offensively from him. I'm hoping for his sake he does a little bit better than that. I'm hoping for, say, like a 110 weighted run WRC plus season for him. That would mean he probably would be their number 5 hitter at that point if he elevates to that level once again. But again, with the injury issue, you can't count on it. So I like the way they have it projected as 9th. And if they get the extra bump from him, absolutely you'd love to see it. But for right now, I think this is a pretty accurate assumption of what their lineup could ultimately look like. Had no clue Trevino played for them. Now, yes, we did actually talk about that on our MLB Hot Stove Daily videos, where we kind of broke down the trade that went from the Yankees to the Reds there. So overall, I think he's going to be a good backup catcher there, and hopefully he recaptures some of what he had in the beginning of his time with the New York Yankees, or even with the Texas Rangers before that. Last couple of years for the Yankees haven't gone as well offensively. Defense has not gone quite as well either, but we'll see how he performs with the Reds this year. And again, the biggest change for them is their manager, Terry Francona. I think that addition alone is going to change this team from a 77-win team all by himself to an 82, maybe an 83-win ball club. I have that much respect for his ability to handle a roster, to be able to handle that lineup, be able to handle a pitching staff. He's learned a lot over the years, and he's just a baseball guy through and through. I respect his baseball knowledge and knowing when to push the right buttons on a roster much more than I did the manager prior. I thought he should have left a few years ago, but they finally got the job done when they realized that they needed to make a change. They changed and did a very good thing bringing in Terry Francona, and good for them because Terry Francona had retired from the Guardians. He was not expected to be back, but of course his health has dramatically improved, so he says. We'll have to see how long his health stays good, of course, hoping the best for him. But there was a reason why he left the Guardians, and he's a baseball guy, like I said, so he just wanted to get back into the league, and so I'm glad the Cincinnati Reds were able to fit him so well. Looking at their rotation, this is where things get interesting for me. Hunter Green, Brady Singer, remember they just acquired him in the trade this offseason in exchange for Jonathan India. Andrew Abbott, Nick Martinez, who signed the qualifying offer this year, and Nick Lodolo. They have plenty of other guys in the minor leagues that could also be used in this starting staff. But the instability in this rotation more than anything else is what was a problem for them. I thought they should go out there and get another innings-eating type of starter. Right now, if all those guys are healthy, that's a great 1 through 5. I'd be happy with that rotation as long as they stay healthy and perform. But looking at their WAR for this season, they're expecting 3 from Hunter Green, and the rest of them around to 2. I think that's all well and good, but I'm not expecting all those guys to reach those benchmarks. I'm expecting some of those guys to struggle. I'm expecting them to have issues getting deep into games, which has been their problem with the Cincinnati Reds, is not having a guy be able to eat enough innings and having to overtax that bullpen. So here's hoping those guys pitch well enough this year to where they don't have to worry about overtaxing that bullpen, but I do have my worries there. The only guy under a 4 ERA they're expecting is for Hunter Green. They have Nick Martinez right at a 4. I would say probably in that 3.75 to a 4.25 is what I'd expect out of Nick Martinez. But the innings really are what they really liked with him. Looking at the innings assumptions for what they're expecting here, 169 for Hunter Green. I think that's a little bit lofty. Brady Singer, 167. I think that's fairly reasonable. Andrew Abbott, 152. I think that one's also a little bit lofty here, only a year plus in the league. Nick Martinez, 168. Even on the qualifying offer, I think that's still a little bit lofty there. Nick Lodolo at 122, I think, is the only one here that really makes a lot of sense as far as the expectation for how many innings you're going to get here. And so that's why I thought they needed to add another arm to that rotation, or at least somebody who could eat some innings later on. Looking at their bullpen, Alexi Diaz, a great option back there. And then, of course, you have Taylor Rogers, Emilio Pagan, Sam Moll, Tony Santillan, Brent Suter, Scott Barlow, and Graham Ashcraft, a guy that they could probably flex into that starting rotation if necessary. But overall, I like the addition of Barlow. Has the ability to close if necessary, if things go poorly anyway with Diaz. But looking at that bullpen, I think Diaz is going to have to play a little bit better than what he did last year. They're expecting about 28 saves from him this year. High walk rate, though, is what worries me. Anytime you get to a bullpen, I want to see strikeouts. I want to see a low walk rate. Those are the main things I'm really looking for. Ability to keep runners off of base, with the strikeout and be able to avoid giving up free passes. I think the Reds kind of have struggled with that issue. I think Terry Francona has recognized that issue already. Again, great baseball mind. I'm sure just like Bruce Bochy with the Texas Rangers, the one thing he cannot stand more than anything else is giving up free bases. And so I think he'll impress upon that pitching staff there the need to be in the strike zone this year. So we'll see how things work out. But the bullpen, I think, is a good bullpen. But we'll see if they can improve a little bit more as the year goes along. Injured pitchers, not too much I'm expecting out of those guys, obviously with Tommy Johns. Looking at their minor leagues anyway, nothing at the catcher spot aside from Austin Wynns, who could be on the roster at some point this year as a depth option. Nothing really outside of that one. First base, nothing I'm really expecting there. Second, Cooper Bowman maybe could be a factor for them at some point this year. Not expecting much of an impact though. You get over to third base, Noelvi Marte, of course, could be a factor for them. They're expecting around 150 at-bats. I would hope for a little bit more because if he does get a little bit more at-bats, that means he's having a good year in the minors and he's having a good impact on the Major League roster. I think that's your best-case scenario is Noelvi to really elevate his status with this team and solidify himself as a Major League player this year. I think that's your pie-in-the-sky, hope for this year for Noelvi Marte. Cam Collier, one of their top 100 prospects, could be their third baseman of the future, but not quite there yet. He's at Double-A right now. He's at High A right now. He's expected to be at Double-A this year. Let's see here. Shortstop, they already have Ellie De La Cruz, but Edwin Arroyo, I think he was acquired in that trade for Luis Castillo with the Seattle Mariners. Another really good prospect I have high hopes for. If they have issues continually at third with Noelvi Marte struggling to latch on and stay productive and avoid the suspension issues, then maybe Edwin Arroyo would get that spot there as well. In the outfield, just checking to see if any of these names kind of catch my eye. Nobody that really looks as a nice piece here outside of Will Benson, who could get a nice bit of run this year. In their minor leagues, Rhett Lauder, one of the top 35 prospects in the game, pitched really well last year once he got to the majors. But I think that was just more of a small sample size theater kind of a case here. I think best case scenario for him, you're hoping he gets some really good experience at the minors this year and then gets up to the big league level and gives you, say, 100-ish innings at best if you have a need for those innings. They're expecting for Fangraphs around 117 innings. That's not too bad. I think that if you're having him throw that many innings, that means you've had some other issues in that rotation. And, I'm just hoping that he doesn't get pushed too far too fast because of the need to be able to eat innings there. Remember, they did sign Wade Miley. He's going to take some time to get healthy here. It's going to probably be around, I think it was June, July, somewhere around the All-Star break is when he could be healthy. That's when you get your innings-eating type of pitcher back at that point. And then as far as relievers, some names to kind of keep an eye on there. Ian Jabot, Albert Abreu, Brian Shaw, Alex Young. Those are all some names that I just recognize that could play a role at some point this year if they have struggles among that bullpen, which I'm expecting a few of those guys who struggle with keeping the ball in the strike zone to quickly find their way to the minor leagues and have some of these guys who have experience in the strike zone at the major league level, to get back up to the majors once again with the Cincinnati Reds. So these guys have a really good chance at some point this year to get a call up. So, hopefully those guys stay with the Cincinnati Reds instead of, deciding to opt out of their deals if they don't make the opening day roster there. Overall, I think Cincinnati's in a pretty good spot. The biggest change, like I said, is their manager, Terry Francona. I think that's the biggest impact to their win total from last year. Let's kind of look at their win total again. Was at 77. I think Francona takes them to that 82, 83 win range. I think the addition of Gavin Lux and Austin Hayes to the back end of their lineup, and I think their bullpen being a little bit more solid with some of the additions that they made in Rogers and in Scott Barlow, give them some more depth. And of course, in their non-roster invitees, I think they'll get some good depth out of those guys. The biggest thing that they need to focus on is internal development, getting those young players, position players specifically, to really establish themselves at the major league level if they are major league regulars, rather than just platoon guys or guys who might have a future one day. They need to prove it right now. And then, of course, in that rotation is just staying healthy and getting those innings down and not having to go deep into your minor league system because you failed to do the one thing that you really need out of that rotation right now, which is innings. And we'll see if they get that done. But as far as wins of the offseason for me, looking at this roster, I think the biggest win for me is just their lineup overall being healthy, getting Matt McLain back, adding a Gavin Lux type who, if he gets right this year, could be one of your top 5 offensive pieces for that bench. A little bit stronger there with Jose Trevino behind the plate. I think he'll help with the pitchers as far as their framing, those kinds of things. But we'll see how that rotation really does go. Misses of the offseason, probably extensions. I think this is a team that should have tried to capitalize on a couple of deals with some long-term deals with guys for like contracts for McLain, among others. I think you could have gotten a really cheap deal for McLain this year due to the injury issues he's had, but it would be a bigger risk. And with a smaller market team like this, maybe they're not that they're not that willing to take that much risk on a player like that with the injury red flags that he does possess. Don't really see too many misses outside of that, though. Overall, it's been a really solid offseason. I think the addition of Terry Francona is going to cover a lot of the issues of this team, but I think we'll learn a lot more about this team in 2025 than we did last year. I think this is a team that's going to have to answer some questions. First in that rotation, who's going to be a real player for them going forward, and who isn't? In this lineup, which players are going to be the real deal for them? Who's the real McCoy, and who ultimately is going to be off of this roster in a couple of years? I think this is going to be all about figuring out the long-term future of this Reds team, and having a guy like Terry Francona there at the helm is only going to help in that process there. So I think this is a team that's just going to try to learn a lot about itself and see which pieces are long-term pieces for the future, and then they're going to try to add via free agency next year as well, kind of supplement this roster around the periphery if they need to at that point. Looking at their payroll, where do they currently stand? Well, the Reds, they have a couple of guys that are going to be headed towards free agency next offseason. Nick Martinez, remember, he just signed that qualifying offer. That $21 million comes off the books next year. That means they'll probably need to add a starting pitcher if Graham Ashcraft isn't ready to go by opening day next year. Rogers in the bullpen making $12 million this year, free agent after the end of the year. Unfortunately for them, Candelario still has another year left after this one, and then a club option anyway for 27. I guarantee you that will be declined. Hunter Green is one of the players that they've got signed a pretty nice deal right now, but it basically was just buying up the arbitration years. $6 million this year, $8 million the following year, 15, 16, and then 21. I think that club option obviously will be picked up. He'll be, 30, 31 years old when he does get to that free agency level, and hopefully he's established himself as an ace at that point, and then those deals or those contract numbers look like a real bargain. If he doesn't establish himself as a true bona fide number one in contention for a Cy Young by that point, then I think the Reds wouldn't have had as much success as they would hope for by that time. Of course, you have the mutual option for Austin Hayes as well. I mean, you've gone making $8 million. There could be some real free agent spend or savings anyway from where they were or from where they are in 25 when they go into 2026. A little bit of a step up in payroll from last year to this year, gained about $15 million overall in total salaries. Again, more guys eligible for arbitration the next couple of years. That's why I'd like to see them try to get some extensions done before we get to opening day. Now's the time when you usually see those extension offers submitted to players that are really young. Try to buy some of those arbitration years and maybe a year or two of that free agency as well. Looking at the overall salaries for this club, remember 241 is the luxury tax threshold. This is not a team that's ever going to get close to it though, so we don't need to worry about that. Right now they're sitting at about 74 million in actual AAV, of course. Then you get these arbitration salaries. Add it all up, their luxury tax payroll is $135 million. That's a pretty penny there. That's not a small chunk of change for the Reds. That's about where I expect this team to be when they're building. Now, when they get to their height of their team, they might flex that up to, say, 150 million. But for right now, 135 does sound about right. But look at 26, 27, 28, how those salaries really drop. Factor in the arbitration money, so go ahead and factor in, say, 40 million there. So you take 46, add 40, you get $86 million. That leaves them about $50 million that they'll be able to spend in free agency next year. Now, does that mean they're going to spend it all on one guy for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or Kyle Tucker? No. Could they do it? Sure. But they're going to go and spend this, wisely and add a few pieces to this roster. They're probably going to add a starting pitcher next year if they don't get the production that they're hoping for out of that rotation, and if Graham Ashcraft and Louder don't hit at the way that they're expecting. I would expect them to try to add another bat to this lineup as well, a more proven professional hitter. Doesn't have to be anybody that breaks a bank. Even a type like Tommy Pham, for the Pirates that they just signed this offseason for 1 year, $4 million. I think would be a good veteran bat at the back end of this lineup. But I think if this is a team that's trying to compete in 26, I think they'll try to do it something a little bit bigger, somebody that they could add to the middle of this order to be a RBI producer in this lineup. But again, the Reds, their payroll flexibility, quite valuable going forward there. All right, what holes do they have left on this roster? Like I said, I think this is going to be a year where they're just trying to figure out who stays and who goes off of this current roster. But say they get to the All-Star break and they're winning the division, or they're within a game or two of a wild card, something along those lines. I think this is a team that might buy around the periphery of this team, might add an innings-eating type of pitcher if Wade Miley can't get back and be healthy. Maybe get somebody for that mix there, or a middle relief option. Other than that, I don't see them doing any big buying at the deadline. So as far as holes on this roster, I just don't see them really trying to solve them this year. I think this is much more of a, find out what your roster really has, kind of like what the St. Louis Cardinals really are doing this year. But the Cardinals understand that they don't have a team that's expected to compete this year for a wild card or for the division. The Reds, meanwhile, have Elly De La Cruz. They have some really good pitching. They have a very good young pitching staff. And if those guys hit like they're expected to, then this could be a real chance to win the division here. So things are a little bit different here for Cincinnati than they are for St. Louis. Rafe, if Vladdy is a Red at this time next year, I'll send 200 super chat. You have my word? Well, I don't think it's going to happen, but I hear you. And I'll hold you to it. Don't worry, Rafe. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think best case scenario, kind of looking forward to 2026, is they add somebody in that $20 million range as far as a starter, maybe to a 3 or a 4 year term. Think of kind of like a Nate Eovaldi type of starting pitcher. I don't think you're going to get to the Framber Valdez or anything like that unless the rest of this rotation, doesn't perform. Then they need a number one, and then maybe they go to break the budget a little bit here and spend for a number one type of pitcher. Say they spend, $150 million over, 3 or over 5 years anyway. Gives them $30 million per season with maybe some incentives that could take it to another $5 million on top of that. To get him up to $35 million. But, or what is it? Yeah, I think I did my math right there. 30 times 5, 150. I think that would be about right if they wanted to go for Valdez in free agency in 26. But I think more realistically, they'll try to break it up between a few different options, really kind of, add to multiple spots in this lineup, in the rotation, that they really see as weak points on this roster overall. Alrighty, where do I see holes on this roster? Like I said, again, we're looking more for bench pieces, guys who might help the periphery of this team. Think middle relief more than anything else. Think of a veteran type of a hitter. So we'll go ahead and do one trade for the Cincinnati Reds. I don't think this is a team that will be selling this year. Oh, wrong team. Let me go down here. There's the Reds. As far as like a middle relief option or somebody who could really be a veteran bat for this lineup, teams that I think are going to be out of contention. Let's do the Twins because I think they have some bats that could be of use here to the Reds. Look at their roster here. Majors. All right. Alcala, Bader, Willie Castro might be the one bat that you could add on an expiring type of a deal. I think they would look more in this range to try to really elevate their roster. Let's see here. Where is Edouard Julien? Yes. Where is Miranda? Jose Miranda, 4 years at third base. If Candelario's not working out there, maybe they go after a Jose Miranda type, cost controlled, and would be able to help you out in your lineup here. As far as what it would cost you to bring him in, you're looking about, 15-ish million? You're not going to give up any major major pieces here. But again, kind of think quantity here for the Twins. Adolfo Sanchez could be the headliner of the deal. Maybe go down even further. I think they would. Let's go ahead and do Sammy Stafura. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that one right, but that'll be the headliner of this deal. And then you go maybe a Tyson Lewis. Just go with a couple of shortstops, and there's your trade. Maybe another depth arm. We'll go to page 3 here, just see who pops out. I don't know, like Lariano. Just something small, just to kind of get there for the trade. So validate the trade, post it. And now you got your third baseman for not just this year, but next year and the year after. But that would be if Marte continued to show struggles. If Arroyo didn't look like he could handle third base, then you go ahead and get your guy here in Jose Miranda. And then, of course, you have down in the minor leagues Cam Collier as a long-term option there. This would kind of block him a little bit. But I think if things don't work out at first base or if you have DH question marks, Miranda's the type of player that can flex over to first base for the long term if you need Cam Collier to play there at third base fairly soon. So I don't think acquiring here would block him to where you'd have to think about moving a guy like Cam Collier, but this could be the type of bat that would help him both this year and in years future for the Cincinnati Reds. Where do I see the Reds finishing this year? They finished with 77 wins last year. Like I said, Francona, I think, gets them to that 82, 83 win threshold all by himself. I do not think this will be a good enough team, though, to win the division. I think the Brewers are probably the likeliest to get there. I think the Cubs have a chance if they add an impact bat or an impact starting pitcher. I don't think the St. Louis Cardinals will be much of a factor for the division either. Pittsburgh, if they get elite starting pitching all year long that doesn't falter, doesn't get injured, they could be in the conversation. But by and large, I think they'll have some struggles, and I think they're really going to be hurt by not adding an impact bat or somebody who could at least be a professional hitter and bring some intelligence to this lineup along with a Tommy Pham, somebody who's more current and be able to handle the bat a little bit better on an everyday basis rather than a Tommy Pham type who's more than likely going to be more of a platoon player with the Pittsburgh Pirates. But looking at the Cincinnati Reds, I think we're probably looking at an 83, 84 win season at best here. And I think this is a team that's going to learn a lot about itself. They're going to figure out who's going to be in their starting staff, who can handle it, who can't. They're going to figure out this lineup, whether or not McLean can stay healthy, whether or not guys like Spencer Steer, among others, can really establish themselves as really impactful major league regular players in a lineup. Those are questions I still have about their ability to do it every single day. I think they have the talent. The question is, can that talent translate to on-field production? And this is a big year that they're going to have to figure out all those things, and good on them for bringing in a great talent evaluator at the major league level in Terry Francona, who's going to be able to tell you, from a baseball guy's perspective, how this roster really looks day to day. Is somebody coming into or out of a slump? Is their process good? We're just waiting for the results to come. I think he'll be just the right man for the job rather than what they've had as their manager the last few years. So I do not think they'll make the postseason. I think they'll get bounced relatively early in that division to where they're probably going to look at the deadline and say, more than likely, we're not a competitive team, and so we'll just stand pat and see how our roster looks at the end of the season. Who's here? Who are our pieces we can trust for the long term? Those types of things. As far as expectations for the roster, I'm expecting Elly De La Cruz to just really elevate this year. I'm expecting Matt McLean to really establish himself, and then that rotation, I think, has all the talent in the world. The question is, can they showcase that talent on the field and translate it into on-field success? That'll be where their season will be judged this season more than anything else. I do not see them making any big trades as a result, because I think this is more of about a talent evaluation year for the Cincinnati Reds. Grade for the offseason. They did a few things around the periphery of this team. I can't say they're an A because I don't think they added enough pieces to this roster to really, make them a favorite for the division or anything along those lines, or, guarantee themselves to be, the team of the future in the Central either. With that being said, I still think they did the right thing by bringing in Terry Francona, and for that move alone, I'm going to give them a very solid B here for the offseason. I think that's the biggest addition that they could have made here this year, but it's all about what pieces are going to be here for the long term for the Reds and who's on this roster in 2026. Terry Francona is going to be an invaluable piece to this organization, and we'll see how his impact really does help them turn the corner as a franchise. As far as growth and surprises, like I said, I'm expecting this roster to really figure out their lineup and figure out how much production they're going to get out of Fraley, how much more they can get out of Steer, how much more they can get out of Matt McLean, those type of pieces. But by and large, look at the ages of these guys. Almost all of them are 25 to 29 years old. So their time is right now to really prove it in their prime and show that they can handle it and be able to be productive, major league, impactful players. So we'll see if they get that job done this year. Ceiling for this team, say things work out great. The rotation stays solid all year long. Maybe they surprise us, win the division, get to 91, 92 wins. I think they wouldn't get past, the Phillies. I don't think they'll get past the Mets if they add some starting pitching. I don't think they'll get past the Dodgers. I don't think they'd get past the Arizona Diamondbacks. But other than that, I think this is a good ascending ball club that'll figure out some of their issues for the long term by figuring out which pieces are meant for the long term for this roster, both in the lineup and in their starting staff. Welcome in, Lucas. Appreciate you joining us once again. Floor for the 2025 season, I'd say if they have injury issues in that rotation, if the lineup doesn't produce, McLean goes down again, Elly De La Cruz struggles this year. I think this team is, even with Terry Francona, could easily fall off the map here as well. 77 wins last year. They might go underneath that to say a 72-win season. So that's kind of your range here for the Cincinnati Reds. Best of the best, they could be 91, 92 wins. I think more realistically, we're probably looking in that 82 to 84 win threshold more than anything else with this ball club. Alrighty. Appreciate you. One thing we didn't touch on was the prospects. Let me do that real quick for the Cincinnati Reds. They do have 5 top 100 guys this year. Chase Burns, Rhett Lauder, who did get a taste of Major League experience last year. Sal Stewart, Cam Collier, who could be their third baseman of the future, and Edwin Arroyo, who could also be their third baseman. They have a few guys that they're going to try at that spot over the next year or two. We'll see who really grasps the bull by the horns and wins the job. Edwin Arroyo probably gets moved off of shortstop long term because that's where they have Elly De La Cruz as well. Alrighty. Let's look at the rest of their prospect pool from last year, just to kind of show you how their system has really changed. Arroyo slipped down a little bit. Collier's gone up. So that's a good thing for the Reds organization as far as having Collier start to elevate himself in this system here. He's at, 20, 21 years old right now. Arroyo's just a little bit older, but he's going to have to change positions. So I'd expect his prospect status to change a little bit in the coming years. The rest of these, you can kind of see how they're in that 19 range to 21, and then you get some of your older prospects toward the end. Overall, just a very good system. Are they the best system in all of baseball? Probably not, but I would say they've got a good, top 10, top 15 system overall. They got a lot of depth in a lot of different places there. Alrighty, so with the Cincinnati Reds, like I said, I'm expecting between 82, 84 wins to miss the postseason, and for this year to really be about establishing which pieces are going to be there for the future of this organization, and hopefully they can discern those things relatively early this year and really push for some success after they made the decision to bring in Terry Francona. He's here to win. He's not just here to evaluate your roster and see how good you guys can do with your young guys, and say, good boy, attaboy or whatever. Go out there and get him, be the cheerleader on the bench. He's not there to do that. He's there to win games. So we'll see how that translates to on-field success for the Reds this year. All right, appreciate you guys joining us this evening. We'll have some videos coming out for you guys tomorrow. Be sure to watch those. Check those out. We'll have a couple of other ones coming out the rest of the week as well. And then on Wednesday, I do want to make one small change to how we're going to be doing this formula. I've been doing one team every single day and build up for the 2025 season. I'm going to up that amount a little bit because I have some videos I want to get to towards the beginning of the year that I really want to touch on. A lot of the trades that I'm expecting to see. We'll touch on a lot of the rosters and how things are shaping up for the regular season as well. Kind of final predictions for the 2025 season as well. So tomorrow, our video will be the St. Louis Cardinals. So we'll do that one tomorrow. And then Wednesday we'll double up. We'll do the Brewers and we'll also do the Oakland A's. I'm off on Wednesday, so we might actually get to 3 teams on Tuesday or on Wednesday, but we shall see. Tomorrow is the 2-year anniversary of the day I proposed to my lady, so it'll be a late live for you guys tomorrow. So I do apologize for the late live tonight. Anyway, getting some things done tonight. Be a late one tomorrow as well. So appreciate your patience for sticking with us. Gonna have some fun with the lady. Show her how much she means to us and. Take care of her, and then we'll be live with you guys later in the evening, and we'll do the St. Louis Cardinals tomorrow. All right, appreciate you guys joining us. We'll be back live tomorrow, probably around 11-ish tomorrow evening. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe, and we'll see you then. Y'all have a great evening. Stay safe out there, everybody.